just, what's that? You can see me now? What's better, on or off? Huh? Exactly. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm just going to make it so I can read and we'll go from there. How many of you are experiencing anxiety on a regular basis? Yeah? Is it elevated more so because of the virus and the pandemic? A little bit, no? No? What's that?
Anxious people are getting anxious.
So is anxious, is anxiety always a bad thing?
No,
Cool.
keep us moving.
We stop now, right? We don't have to finish the talk. Your prayer and those tips is where we're going to wind up, believe it or not. I shouldn't tell you the ending, but it's amazing how it ties in so nicely. The tools were mentioned, some of the tools were mentioned, right, in the beginning. We're going to talk about a few more, obviously. But before we do that, we're going to talk about worst-case scenarios. The book Existential Conflicts is by the Spirit Joanna DeAngelis, psychographed by Divaldo Franco. And for those of you that have read Joanna's work, I describe it as, it reminds me of books that I've read in grad school. Right? It's deep. You got to read the same paragraph a couple of times. She goes into a lot of detail and worst case scenario type of stuff. The problem, right? What is it? How does it manifest? What happens if it's left unchecked? But the good news is the chapter always ends from more of a therapist perspective and a hope perspective and what we can do. So bear with me in the beginning if it sounds scary. Just know that it gets better. Yeah. So here we go. We won't be talking about these books tonight, but obviously a lot of the stuff we talk about stems from here, right? And Joanna's work tonight from this book ties into those main books of Spiritism. This is the cover of Existential Conflicts. I don't know if we have copies out front or not, but that's what it looks like. And essentially, this book, like many things in Spiritism, relate to this graph, right? Existential Conflicts, chapter by chapter, anxiety being one of those chapters that we're talking about tonight, is all about experiences in this life happening due to choices that we made or didn't make in previous lives, right? The consequences, the reality that we've created for ourselves, and how we're evolving along this continuum. Essentially, starting in the beginning, right, when we're created, all of us the same, simple and lacking knowledge in the bottom left, and progressing our way to pure spirit. All of us, if we're on earth, with very few exceptions, are in the bottom third of this area, right? We're still tied in a lot of ways to pride and ego and vice. But the whole idea is working our way beyond that as we progress. And I'm having trouble. It's advancing up there, but it's not advancing here. Why not?
Close it out.
Close it out?
Yeah, because you probably have another PowerPoint open.
Yeah, there's several. Don't get anxious. Okay. I'm so anxious. Let's see here. Man, I'm glad I didn't put my stick away. That's good. Thank you. So there's the dictionary.com definition of anxiety. You notice it always starts, I shouldn't say always, but in this example, anxiety, the definitions typically start with the most common definition, yeah? In this case, it happens to be the most intense definition, right, for the word, right? Distress, uneasiness of mind caused by fear, danger of misfortune. That's what we think of a lot of times when we think of anxiety. But look at the next definition. Earnest but tense desire, right? That doesn't sound so bad, right? A little bit of anxiety, right? That excitement, that anticipation, that desire that you want to fulfill, right? Anxiety is not always negative, if you will. Left unchecked, as we'll learn, is where it becomes more of a problem. And then eagerness, that doesn't sound bad, does it? To be eager? So being anxious because of certain conditions in the world and in our life, we shouldn't assume that's like we're tagging ourselves with a bad thing. But it can grow and become that first definition, obviously. So there's several factors that predispose us to anxiety, according to Joanna in this book. And it starts, as you might suspect, right, ancestral from previous lives. Right? We all know that we bring things with us from our previous lives. Right? She talks about innate fear of strangers, a fear of non-family members, fear when children are separated from the mother. A lot of these things, all of these things can tie into anxiety. She talks a little bit more about the patient, right? The person presents with excessive fear without knowing the reason, right? How many of you have children or no children, or even adults for that matter, that seem like there's a fear there, but they can't really explain why. It's just a part of them, right? So that's a common sign for advanced anxiety, right? Excessive fear without knowing the reason. That causes more fear, right? You get all worked up, you're scared, and that creates more fear, and next thing you know, you're in this vicious circle of fear due to the anxiety. Little things will set you off, right? You can be caught up in this vicious circle when something little that might appear to me or someone that's not involved in your circle as trivial or not so severe. It's just that last straw that broke the camel's back. And it creates these childlike reactions she talks about, even in adulthood. She dives into early in the life, right, the physical life, how the bond with the parent produces safety, and how it can develop into separation anxiety, where the separation from the parent makes the child anxious, cries, is panicked, is nervous, very disturbed in the absence of a parent. That happened with one of my daughters early in life. We're past that now, but definitely couldn't figure that out. There was never any history of things you might think would trigger that, but it was with her, it was in her. So my assumption with that is that it obviously wasn't something learned in this life, but something that came with the spirit from a previous life. And this insecurity can stay with a child throughout life if left unchecked. Fundamental anxiety is a term that she used, and she says that it stems from feeling alone and abandoned. Whether it was early in this life or in previous existences, you've been abandoned, you've been left alone, and this leads to a torment of yourself in this period when you're feeling this anxiety. To the point where you're fearing something that hasn't happened yet. It's so tormenting that you're just waiting for the shoe to drop, right? Just waiting for something to go wrong. And that the child longs to stand out with prominence, which creates this desire to conquest or accomplish things. And we'll talk more about that in detail, but essentially this child, if you will, feeling alone, feeling abandoned, whether it's actually happening currently or it's happened in the past, but left with this anxiety that this person, this child, young, old, has this constant desire to achieve and be in motion, and not necessarily in a healthy way, which we'll talk about in just a minute. She tells us that this leads that patient or that person, that spirit, down this road of avoiding true emotional involvement. Their fear of loss and insecurity is so strong, and subconsciously they have this need for self-realization. In other words, it's bad, it worsens, but at our core, right, in our conscience, our subconscious, regardless of where we are, we know that this is the God's law, the universal laws are with us. So there's a subconscious purpose and desire to have this realization, to wake up, to snap out of it, and to evolve. But it doesn't happen easy. And if it's not achieved, this escape from this subconscious is anxiety. And it manifests, it worsens, it creates irrational thought. And the person with it can perceive weakness, which leads to insecurity, stressful behavior. All these little things, little by little, adding to where you start to see all these different behaviors. Right? She tells us that anxiety is a very strong factor with disturbance and imbalance. So in other words, not just physical manifestation, not just the brain necessarily, right? Disturbance and imbalance, so spiritual related, right? There's a lot of significance here to the non-material part of us. So much so that she says, look, this deserves special care. Don't overlook it, right? If you're having problems and they're progressively getting worse, it's not eagerness, it's not anxiety in a positive sense. It's leading to paranoia, it's leading to self-isolation, it's leading to mania, leading to bad choices. Don't delay, right? If you realize it, if you sense it, or further pointed out, you should be careful to observe it, and then obviously seek therapy, seek help to resolve it. Because if left unchecked, it just keeps growing. And this is where she points out, this is probably her strongest recommendation in this chapter, right? Careful observation, right? Because at our core, our subconscious, right? Our guardians, right? We are surrounded by help if we're paying attention, if we're cognizant. If we can just pay careful attention to the signs, and when we get down and it gets worse, if we can just pay careful attention, it's going to reveal to us, we can actually be rational in the moment and realize that we have this unhealthy behavior due to lack of serenity. And a person will be full of expectations, but typically in a disturbing way, and it creates these imbalanced actions. So as the person itself going through that, as us, right, even though we're not maybe experiencing this, if we're paying attention to the people we come in contact with, we'll see the signs in their imbalanced actions and some of their choices. He talks about poor ethical, poor moral values being the warning signs of these things. But observation is the key. Furthermore, as the severity increases, people with experiencing these anxiety issues will have the strong desire to conquer, to win, to achieve, to surpass goals. And they'll really create these ambitious goals for themselves. They'll experience mood shifts frequently. They'll go from being very serious to very humorous and then back again. And it creates this need for them of constant activity. My wife has an expression. I don't know how you say it in Portuguese, but it translates to 8 or 80, right? Now, how do you say that in Portuguese? There you go. And of course, guess who she says has this problem? Me, right? I suffer from this, supposedly. So as I'm preparing this and reviewing this for tonight, my life flashes back, before me, these 53 years or what have you. And I'm reading this, and it's describing me to a T earlier in my life, in my late teens, in my 20s, to the point to where it dawned on me that everything she's talking about, a progression of activities, of behavior, of choices, and then to that realization of when something happened. I can remember vividly, I was doing a semester in Reno, Nevada. I was divorced at that time. I was a nanny living in a house with a woman that was recently widowed, not a love interest. She wanted a man in the house that would be a male figure for her 2 children, but not a love interest. So I took the job as a friend of a friend. Actually, the guy that was the best man at my wedding to my wife. It was his aunt. Long story short, it was after a period of great depression and sadness, escalating progressive poor choices behaviorally, morally, vice and habits that I had undertaken. And it was at this point where I'm in a house free of really any bad things at that point. I'd had the realization to stop some of the habits that I had. I was clean, and I was in school. I was progressing. But these two young kids in the house, right, very young children, without a father, were going through their own stuff. And it triggered this realization in me that freaked me out, made me snap and go within and really get scared about the future me, who I am today, about the father I am today, and how I was going to be terrible at it. And that realization at that time in my life triggered some of the stuff we're going to talk about next. So I'm not going to tell you the end of the story. You have to stay till the end, okay?
Oh,
All right.
okay.
I learned that from a speaker, a class I took. So this back and forth, right? Serious, humorous, this constant activity. Eventually, what happens? You're going to crash, right? And I just shared with you part of my crash in life. The more dissatisfied this person becomes, the more they want to accomplish, jumping from thing to thing. Usually, typically, and from my own experience, I'll tell you, there's not much planning involved. You just go for it. You swing for the fences. And it creates this demanding, aggressive behavior to the point to where you want to fix things that you think are wrong in the world with other situations. A lot of times it's acting out against authority, saying the heck with the law, right? Doing whatever you want, being in relationships and wanting others to follow you as opposed to coming together as a team. And these relationships will become very turbulent, typically, because you impose yourself on others. There's no restrictions on your conduct. Remember, we're talking about worst-case scenarios here, right? But the behavior and the conduct become just over the top. There's no direction for the future, and the behavior and the actions will change frequently. Like I said before, up, down, 8 or 80, right? Good, bad, nice, mean, turbulent. When these folks with their anxieties left unchecked, attraction to people happens quickly. They become passionate relationships. They experience falling in love quickly, right? It's that 8 or 80 thing again. It's all or nothing. They typically are very controlling. They want their partners to prove their fidelity. And obviously, this becomes unbearable for the partner, and things go out of control. So again, worst-case scenarios here, okay? And then Joanna goes on to talk about how anxiety manifests differently between individuals. But characteristics and symptoms are very similar from person to person. They are stressed easily due to a lack of self-confidence and harmony. Typically, they suffer from depressive disorders. They're very common similarities in these advanced cases. Again, if left unchecked, all right? Anxious individuals in our society is very common. America, believe it or not, consumes 50% of the world's antidepressants and anxiety-type drugs. 50%, a lot. So anxiety or treatment for anxiety via pharmaceuticals, at least we can say, is very common. Right? You're not alone if this is happening to you. Right? Unfortunately, many people refuse to recognize the disturbance that torments them. And this is Joanna's words. These are not my words. They refuse to recognize them. They disguise them with alcohol, tobacco, drugs, or sex, which further complicates their picture. My list, it would be easier to tell you the things I didn't do on that list at my worst. All right? It's amazing how you can slip into all of these things to hide your pain or to suppress your pain and think you're just living the life, and yet you're just moments away from crashing and making bad choices. Okay? But at its worst, there's hope. There's things we can do, all right? And there's proof out there that we can turn these things around with effort and hope. My apologies. So it all starts with recognition of the situation. For me, that was 1999. Reno, Nevada, babysitting or being a nanny to two young kids who had recently lost their father. These kids were having their own issues. They just lost their dad. One of them was 9, the other one was 7, I think, a little boy, a little girl. And in a moment of trying to control the house, I lost my temper. As I had learned as a kid, this is learned behavior, or maybe I brought it with me, who knows. It wasn't physical, but it was this horrific yell and this scream. Like, you gotta listen to me, or whatever. I don't even remember the words I said. I just remember the rage in my whole being. Nothing physical, nobody was hurt. I scared the crap out of them, I'm sure, right? But at that very moment, as crazy as I had gone down that road of addiction and hiding and running and whatever, right? As far as I'd gone down that road, I had yet to have the realization until I had the lives of 2 children in my hands, basically. And at that time, I had this recognition of the situation. And sure as I'm standing here, right, I'd bet every dollar I have, right, on this situation. That is when I had the clarity, right, this opportunity. What Joanna describes as this door of opportunity. And I sought out help, right? I wasn't a spiritist then. I think I believed in reincarnation at that point. But I was on my search. You name the church, temple, cult, or club, right, about self-development. I had been there, right? And I'd yet to find one that made sense to me until I walked in this door, obviously. But my point is, at that moment, I had my recognition of the situation, and I wanted help. And that's what she tells us. She says, look, you're going to find help when you have this moment of recognition. The opportunity will be there. For me, I found it in a group therapy session at Reno, Nevada, graduate students studying to be psychologists. There were 8 or 9 of us in this group, and for me, that's when it all started, right? Everything changed after that. So I found help in that situation, and what she tells us, right, without a doubt, all the afflictions and disappointments that confuse the human being, right, stem from the spirit. And the conflicts abound, right, around us, and they all originate from frustrating physical experiences of the past. So whatever I had been experiencing in life up to that point, plus what I brought with me from previous lives, it all culminated in that moment to this recognition that I had a bad problem and I needed to do something about it. And that led me to first start materially, right, or mentally, psychologically with therapy. And she tells us that over multiple lifetimes, that the self externalizes the disturbance and guilt, right, that needs to be released. Listen to this again. The self externalizes the disturbance and the guilt that needs to be released, right? Chaos, turmoil, right? Challenges, right? Via reparative suffering in order to balance itself. Is that, if you summarize that, does that say suffering is good for you? It does, doesn't it? Right? Suffering is good, right? When this does not happen, though, when we don't experience the suffering, when we don't allow ourselves to release this disturbance, right? We become disturbed, we become restless, we become anxious. And left unchecked, these things grow and grow and grow. But in that moment of realization, in that moment of grief, in that moment of releasing all that stuff, we do the most growth if we realize it, pay attention, and move down that road. So, anxiety issues, she tells us, again, occurs a release of the inner drama that lie in the subconscious. That's what anxiety issues is, the release of the inner drama that lie in the subconscious. I had a lot of inner drama in my 20s, okay? Affecting the emotional system, the therapy of release has to begin in the rationalization of the torment. Does that sound like fun? No way. The rationalization of the torment. But that's it. We got to hit the wall, we've got to recognize it, and we got to work through this suffering, if you will. I love that slide. I love that page in the book. So, you have the opportunity, you're recognizing it, you're paying attention, you start to do something about it, but she warned us that the reflection and the adoption of optimism works slowly, right? So I woke up in Reno. I started making strides. Do you think life was easy every day after that? Heck no. I backslid, I got better, I went, back and forth a little bit. My worst was then, though, right? But over time, right, patience develops. Balance develops, resulting in a pathway to resolution, which coming to this place every Thursday night is part of my path, right? That's one of my tools. But it's slow, and it can take lifetimes. So we're instructed, her therapy, just like you read before the prayer, right? You gave some great advice. And this is what she's recommending. This is what Joanna tells us. Devote time to uplifting readings that encourage mental and emotional renewal. Easy, right? How many have a book like this somewhere in the house? If you don't, you got Google, right? You can find a PDF of this book probably, right? Just start your day with a page. Next thing you know, though, if you really get into this, it's 2 pages, 3 pages. Next thing you know, you're running late because you wanted to finish the chapter, right? And I'll tell you what, on the days that I don't do something like this, it's a little bit harder to have a great day, right? They talk about yoga. I don't know about you guys, but if I try to do yoga, I might hurt something. So I haven't adopted this one, but she says yoga to discipline will and the nervous system. So maybe I should pick it up. She recommends meditation, right? She says meditation is equally important since it induces calm and well-being. I'll definitely support that one, right? Do we still do the meditation now? The last Thursday of the month, right?
The last Thursday.
So we're not doing meditation tonight?
You are?
Come on.
Nobody told you that? You are.
Oh, I was supposed to do a meditation seminar?
I messed up.
Jeez, now I'm really upset.
I messed it up.
Now you ain't.
It's my fault.
That's all right. We'll have Livia do the vibration, and she'll do a guided meditation for us. All right. All right. But meditation is important because it induces calm and well-being. It inspires goodness and love. Right. Compassion and benevolence. Look at this. Not just to those around you, to yourself. How many of you beat yourself up for things you did in your 20s? Yeah. Heck, I'm beating myself up for things I did when I was 16 sometimes. Less and less because I'm working through it. But it's so important to be charitable towards others, to be benevolent, to be kind, to be loving. But man, love yourself, right? You ever try it? Just look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. You're amazing. Have you tried that? It's hard, man. It is hard.
It didn't work for me.
It didn't work for you? Listen, don't give up. Keep practicing. What is it? Louise Hayes, right? She talks about she calls it mirror work. And
I gave myself a hug.
I gave yourself a hug? Okay, good. That's a good start. So try doing that and forgiving yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. All right. She goes on to say that meditation also promotes happiness for living, satisfaction in self-realization, surrendering to the divine will. What does that mean? Surrendering to the divine will. What's that? Acceptance. Yeah, in 12-step programs we call it giving it up to a higher power, right? If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? And if you're alive and you're able to surrender, that means you're making progress, right? Because it didn't kill you yet, I guess, is one way to look at it. But in other words, give it up to God, right? Have self-awareness, right? Be aware of what's happening. Catch little things before they escalate. Self-responsibility. We are, at the end of the day, the only one responsible for our actions. People can do whatever they do to you, physically, mentally, neglect, right? At the end of the day, we make the choice of how we react. You want revenge, you want retaliation, you want an eye for an eye, or can we truly kiss our neighbor on the cheek, right, or hit the other cheek, whatever the saying is? Can we be responsible, say, look, I chose to do that to myself because I made that choice. It's hard, but it's true. And then a noble sense of existence. And noble is such a great word, yeah? Do we feel noble? Am I a noble person? Am I making noble decisions on a daily basis, right? And if you look at it like that, I think it makes it easier. Like Peter talks about this at times, about waking up with gratitude and then self-acknowledging, self-accounting before you go to bed. He's mentioned this in some of his talks. If you can put your head on your pillow at the end of the night and say, I was noble, I made noble choices, right? Man, I feel inspired and my chest is puffing out, right? Just saying it. I made noble choices, right? And I think if we think of things like that, like I want to be able to say I made noble choices today when I put my head on the pillow. That becomes my goal, right? Even if I'm not verbalizing it throughout the day. If I know at the end of the day, I want to, when I lay down and I want to say, man, I made noble choices, right? That's really cool. And it gives you this goal every day to live, I think, to live by. So she reminds us, though, after this advice, she says, look, natural anxiety, the desire for what is awaited, right? It's normal, right? It's expected. It's a normal expectation, and it's healthy. There is nothing wrong with being anxious, right? Unless it's unchecked and it manifests, right? Because the torment, however, produces the disturbances. Torment produces the pathological state. So I think we're all a little bit nervous with the state of the affairs and some of the things that have been going on in the world. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be nervous. But don't ever be afraid to get help, to check it, right? And do things to reduce it. Because she goes on to say that the afflictions, right, generated by this excessive anxiety can be eradicated, right? First and foremost, specialized care, professional care. Don't ever be afraid to talk to a professional, your doctor, a psychologist. We have spiritual assistance here, but there's a need at times for a therapist, right, for a medical professional. Come here on Wednesday nights, right? Are we doing fraternal counseling now live?
Yes.
Awesome. So fraternal counseling is back on Wednesdays. Here on Thursdays, you get to listen to speakers about a good topic, typically. On the last Thursdays, we do meditation, but just not this Thursday, right?
If you give me 12 minutes.
I'll give you 12 minutes. By coming here and doing these things, getting a pass and balancing your chakras, right? Starting that habit of prayer in the morning, maybe during lunch, or maybe on the drive, right? Before you go to bed. All of these things create this cultivation of dignified thoughts. And they all assist the healing process and promote peace. And finally, if none of this, right, sticks with you, and you don't remember anything else, Joanna says, just remember the psychotherapist par excellence, right? Jesus, right? Matthew. In Matthew, he says, asserted in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So no matter what you're going through, right? And again, I got emotional up here because of a really difficult time in my life that flashed back. And you know what they say, right? If you don't have to live it to feel the pain, right? If you're just thinking about it, I just gave myself, you relive it, right? So no matter how bad it is, no matter how low you are, no matter what you did in the past, or just remember that. What was the sentence? I got to read it again. Where is it? The rationalization of the torment. Where is it? The self. I can't even find my great sentence. The point. Is it right there? The therapy of release has to begin in the rationalization of the torment. So no matter where we are, how bad it was, how bad it might get, you know, if I knew how to use a computer, it would help, yeah? I'm getting anxious now. No matter where we are, no matter what we're feeling, right? The fact that we're suffering, mourning, but we can realize it, use that as your moment of opportunity to remember this is one life in many, many, many lives. We're exactly where we've placed ourselves, right, based on our choices in the past. We created this reality, right? No matter what we might be going through. And we have the ability to change. Any moment, right? God gave us, He created us, He gave us the ability to grow and evolve life after life with two big things, right? His love and His laws in our conscience, and the gift of free will. I choose right now what I become. We choose right now how to handle the adversity that we've created for ourselves, or what life might be throwing at us. I'm going to put my head on the pillow tonight and say, I made noble choices. I made noble choices. That's my goal every night. And man, I fail. I fail miserably some days. But tonight, I'm going to be able to say I made noble choices. Assuming nobody cuts me off on the turnpike. All right? Hey, thank you for listening. I appreciate your time and attendance.